Welcome to AeroDive, where we take short but deep dives into different fields of knowledge. Today, let's look at how to store food for a crisis. This video is about practical considerations, so we won't get into political details on what might cause such a crisis. And for practical reasons, I will focus on normal food. I won't cover some special, super durable food you wouldn't normally enjoy. Instead, I will focus on the normal things that you can happily integrate into your diet anyway, and that means if no crisis should materialize, you can eat them with enjoyment before they expire. But let's say there is a crisis. Your normal supply chain for food is interrupted, and maybe there's even no electricity to cool food or to boil it. How to prepare for that? Well, let's start with something simple. You should always have a well-stocked freezer. Even if electricity goes down, the food in there won't spoil immediately. Put your favorite food in, and in the first days of a crisis, you will at least have good food, which gives you time to deal with other essential things, like gathering your loved ones, gathering information, making plans, talking to your neighbors, and so on. And who knows, maybe the crisis will be over in a few days, so that you don't even have to dig into your long-term storage so much. And freezing some complete meals that you prepared earlier is also a really good way to prepare, especially for these first few days. They can easily be the hardest. As for heating or cooking the food, if electricity goes down and you don't have a gas stove, consider stocking a camping stove. But eventually you will have to use wood. Normally firewood needs to dry for a year or two, but you can still burn fresh wood. It will just be harder to ignite, and it will generate more smoke and soot. But once you have a fire going, put some fresh wood next to it to quick dry it. And to ignite the fresh wood, consider storing some fire accelerant and some wood, like in this area, birch wood. Birch wood will burn quite easily even when not dried. As for how long frozen food stays fresh once electricity breaks down, you can check the non-frozen variants of the same food. For example, if you buy fresh meat, the best before will be a few days. And it will be about the same time span of durability when your frozen meat thaws. Bread and fruit or vegetables are better for a while longer, milk even for weeks, hard cheese even longer. So have some meat and fish in the freezer, but don't fill it with that stuff completely, because you can't eat it all in a few days. Leave some space for some medium-term stuff like vegetables and hard or semi-hard cheese. And if the freezer stops working, you have to move these things to your normal, dark, cool and dry storage room, about which we will talk soon. And you have to use a cloth or tissue to remove condensed water that is in direct contact with the food, if possible. For example, on the cheese, there might be some water condensed, and you have to get rid of that. Good. Let's move on to the real long-term stuff, non-frozen food. I'm going for about a year of durability here, because I sincerely believe in the ability of people to self-organize. In other words, even after a severe crisis, it probably won't take a year for some semblance of an economy to form so that you can buy some food again. Um, for all this non-frozen stuff, it should be in a room that is as cool as possible, like a basement. And the room needs to be dark because light also degrades the food. Food packaging keeps out sunlight, but it isn't completely impervious. You can easily see that if you hold it against the sun, for example, the packaging. So take some precautions, keep the room dark, and also keep it dry. Some of the food stuff I mentioned is kept durable through dryness. Moisture will quickly ruin it. And while depending on where you live, for example, if you live in a flat in the city, it might not be possible to get a cool room for your food. But at least really try to keep the light and the moisture out. So, non-frozen food, let's cover all three groups of macronutrients first. Carbohydrates. Well, carbohydrates are easy to store by getting the super dry stuff like pasta or rice. Flour and sugar too. You might not bake a cake in a crisis, but maybe bread, or there's always gruel if life gets cruel, you know. Jam is also good to store. Ketchup is a nice sauce to go with pasta or rice in case you have nothing else, and it also contains a lot of carbs. Alright, let's move on to fat. For fats, get some plant-based oils like olive oil. As long as that doesn't get wet or hit by light, it is really quite stable for up to a year. And consider getting some smaller bottles because once you open them, moisture will get in to some degree. Nuts are also good for a few months, and next to a lot of fat, they also contain some protein and micronutrients. Now for protein. Proteins are a bit more tricky. Animal proteins are best in general. Shelf-stable milk is good for a few months. Canned condensed milk is good for up to a year. Canned meat is really good. Canned boiled sausages, for example, also for up to a year. Dried meat is a good addition, but more expensive than canned meat. Dried meat is lightweight, so it can help you if you have to travel by foot for some reason, but that's in general something you should avoid at all costs during a crisis. Alright, let's have a look at micronutrients. If you can get some animal-based food, like I mentioned for proteins, you have most micronutrients covered anyway. In addition, go for canned fruit and vegetables, and some dried fruit for lightweight emergency stuff. If you should run out of canned fruit and vegetables, there is a risk of scurvy. One way around this is to make tea from non-poisonous green plants by simply boiling plant parts, mostly the leaves, in water. But how to find a plant that isn't poisonous? Well, you will have to check for your own part of the world, but here in Central Europe, most common forest trees are not poisonous. Spruces, pines, firs, beeches, birches, and so on. Oaks are probably too bitter in the taste of the tea, even though they're not really poisonous. And yew trees are really poisonous, but they are quite rare. But in general, these non-poisonous forest trees are easy to identify without much botanical knowledge, and it's easier than telling apart herbs or bushes or all those different park and garden trees. Lastly, let's look at drinks. I would suggest storing some drinkable water in glass or metal containers. Plastic is second best, but in my experience, water that has been in plastic storage for a long time will have a bit of a weird taste. Yeah, better than dying of thirst, of course. But in addition, get some water filters that people use for hiking or camping. And when you run out of these things, you will have to boil your water, and you can look earlier where I talked about the boiling tips, how to boil things. Um, and tea and coffee can be stored for a long time so that you can spice up your boiled water a bit and get some caffeine, of course. Alright, that's it for now. If you would like to add something, please use the comments, and see you soon.